Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well today. Well, this video is designed to give you a closer look at structural adjustment policies and what they are, and then give you some evaluation ideas to think about, because these are super controversial things and they're really helpful and also really constricting for developing nations. It's created this situation that oftentimes it's almost impossible for the developing nation to comply with the rules set up by the International Monetary Fund. So structural adjustment policies were created by the International Monetary Fund, and they typically would include such things as encouraging trade liberalization, as encouraging exports of primary agricultural commodities known as cash crops and other commodities such as minerals and metals. So these are things that if you receive money, this is what I should say, if you receive money from the International Monetary Fund, you must put in these structural adjustments to your economic policies in your country. You'll be asked maybe to devalue your currency. You will be asked to encourage foreign direct investment. You will be asked to privatize your nationalized industries. You would be encouraged to reduce government expenditure in order to ensure the payments that the government budget and that government budgets are balanced. You would be forced to have austerity measures, which to reduce social spending. Austerity means that you make things simpler. Like if you live in an austere apartment, you have very few things in your apartment. Charging for basic services such as education and healthcare. You would be asked to remove subsidies and price controls to protect maybe your agricultural sector. You would be asked to improve governance, which is the process by which decisions are taken and policies are implemented, reducing levels of corruption. These sound great, right? This is going to turn to result probably in long-term growth for your particular country. But the thing is, those are really difficult things politically for leaders to do. I mean, if you are living in a developing country, just take this one, for example. I mean, this one right here, healthcare. You imagine being a politician in a developing nation and saying, well, we took money from the IMF, and therefore we have to start charging for basic services such as education and healthcare. And your children now, if you want to go to school, you have to pay. Like, what? Dude, I'm not doing that. How can I do that? If you're a subsistence farmer and you've had your children have free education, how are you going to all of a sudden start paying for it? They have political disaster for some governments and for politicians, and the result, it's very difficult and actually nearly impossible sometimes, depending on the country, to actually comply with the International Monetary's SAPs, the structural adjustment policies. So as you can imagine, SAPs were heavily criticized by many development economists and by developing countries themselves, right? So although SAPs may help in controlling inflation, of course, right? Improving the workings of the internal markets and the economy, lowering government budget deficits, reducing public ownership, enforcing or reforming exchange rate policies, it's also felt there are heavily costs involved, and these costs fell mainly on the very poor people, and they included stuff like a reduction in government-provided services like education and healthcare, increasing unemployment, a fall in real wages, an increase in prices of essential products as government subsidies were taken away. These are real-life impact on people who are already really poor. And so by the SAPs helping in the long run in the big picture, I like to think of economics sometimes as like the daily life economics of people, and then like the big picture, and of course they're intricately related. But the daily life of people, if all of a sudden there's increased, you have to pay for healthcare, there's increased unemployment, fall in real wages, and beans at the local store are more expensive. Come on, that's not very popular, and it's hard to convince somebody that these structural adjustment policies are indeed good, even though they are on the big. And some people would say that SAPs have actually led, and I love this term, I don't know why I like this term, it's something called de-development or undevelopment, which is indicated by increasing rates of malnutrition, declining school attendance rates, and increasing infant mortality. So although SAPs may have led to long-term growth, which is all good and fine and certainly is in the best interest of everybody, it's often argued that short-term costs are too high. And so one of the solutions that has been put forth by many governments is this idea of debt relief. Debt relief, debt relief, debt relief, debt relief, right? What does that mean? It means that, come on, it's getting to a point where some countries their need to service debt, meaning pay the debt, means that they're unable to spend money on other areas of their economy, right? And this is the case of an opportunity cost that has two detrimental effects. First of all, there's going to be slow economic growth as a result of government just paying off debt to foreign countries, right? So if governments don't have funds to invest in improving infrastructure because they're paying debt, that's bad. And it also slows down development. So slows down growth, slows down development because governments can't afford to provide essential services. And the one example that Jocelyn Blink gives us is Malawi spends more money on debt servicing than it does on the provision of health care. Think about that. It spends more money paying off its debt than it does on providing health to its people. And so debt relief will increase and release money, allowing governments to finance development projects. And this can, if you think about it, you could say like, okay, so if you don't have to pay the debt, that's money that you now have in your country. And one ways that this is often shown is on a what you call it, on a production possibilities curve. And so if this money is now reinvented in healthcare, then it's actually going to improve the overall production possibilities maybe, or spending possibilities line in a particular country. And just to close my thoughts on this evaluation portion, there's an economist named Susan George who argues that debt creates problems for developing countries in areas such as environmental damage, increased drug usage, higher taxes, higher unemployment, increased immigration, and increased levels of conflict. And she's a big argument that developed countries themselves should benefit if they were to give debt relief to developing nations. So it's argued that debt relief would allow developing countries to experience better rates of economic growth. And those rising incomes would create more demand, and this would benefit the developed countries as well. So, as a result, the IMF and the World Bank launched this new program, and it's known as the Heavily Indebted Poor Countries, or the HIPC. And this initiative, reviewed and modified in 1999, was created in order to accelerate progress towards meeting some of the Millennium Development Goals. So HIPC countries are those with the highest levels of poverty, which are undergoing enormous international debt relief measures to reduce the external debts. And so there are 40 different countries that have been identified as being potential for debt relief, and the majority of these countries are in sub-Saharan Africa. So let's take a look at a summary of the conditions that would need to be met, or the criteria that would have to be met. And I just put this little table in here. So in order to be considered for HIPC initiative assistance, the countries must, 1, be eligible to borrow from the World Bank's International Development Agency. 2, face an unsustainable debt burden that cannot be addressed through traditional debt mechanisms. 3, have established a track record of reform and sound policies through the IMF and World Bank support programs. And 4, have developed a poverty reduction strategy paper, or an SAP, through a broad-based participatory process in the country. So once the above are achieved, the country may begin to receive interim relief on its debt servicing. But in order to receive full and irrecoverable reduction in debt available under the HIPC initiative, a country must, 1, establish a further track record of good performance with the IMF and the World Bank, implement a satisfactory key reforms agreed with the eligibility conditions, and adopt and implement PRSP or SAP for at least 1 year. And once the country has done this, once the country has met these criteria, it can reach its completion point, which allows it to receive the full debt relief committed at the decision point. In other words, they'll get their debt relief. My gosh, it got all tangled up in fancy words. They will allow them to actually receive the debt relief, which of course would make them feel super good, and they would get a bunch of red stars, and maybe, if they're super lucky, the people would even give their governments a gold star. Okay, so there are the qualifications for the HIPC initiative. So let's look at a list of countries that have qualified for, are eligible, or potentially eligible to receive HIPC initiative assistance as of January 2010. Okay, so the post-completion joint point countries, these people have done it. Afghanistan, Benin, Bolivia, Burkina Faso, Burundi, Cameroon, Central African Republic, the Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, the Gambia, Ghana, Guyana, Haiti, Honduras, Madagascar, Mali, Mauritania, Mozambique, Nicaragua, Niger, Rwanda, Sao Tome Principe, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Tanzania, Uganda, and Zambia. The interim countries, in other words, between decision and completion, they're on their process. Chad, Democratic Republic of Congo, Ivory Coast, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Togo. And then the pre-decision points, these countries down here at the bottom, are on their way of getting debt relief. And the thing here is that the idea is that by getting debt relief, these countries will be able to reinvest that money, or to invest that money that's leaving their country, paying off this debt, and provide basic services and improve the, the well-being of their country, which is to say the development of their country. Okay, so there you have it, a good look at what exactly the SAPs do, and also take a look at what the impact is on a debt relief for particular countries. I hope you found this video to be helpful. We'll talk to you in a bit.